So my world hasn't changed that much, actually. And I've been married. I've been with the same woman for 39 years, and I have a very large and very close family, and the people I work with haven't changed, and my dogs are, we have a lot of dogs, and they're still there. So my life hasn't changed that much. And by the way, I should say, for whatever it's worth, no one really cares, but Fox was really nice to me for the 14 years I worked there. They never said, you can't say this, you can't say that. They let me say whatever I wanted, and I knew on some level, probably someday I'll go too far and have like a Hungarian on, and they'll fire me, and they did, but they were always nice to me. I can't kind of complain about Fox, I'm just being honest.
And what are your plans for the future? I think that this is what, in this uncertain situation, gives you a purpose of life, right?
I would say two things. One, this is the third time I've been fired as an adult, and I would really recommend it to anybody. I think
what was the first two?
I worked at other cable news networks and was also unceremoniously fired, and always on the front page of the New York Times with cackling glee. But it's great to get fired because it keeps you from being a truly horrible person. I mean, we're all sort of horrible people because we're people. But getting fired, the problem with men when they're successful is they start to think they're Jesus. It just happens, and you get this hubris, like, I can do anything, I'm so important. And getting fired reminds you that, no, you're just like everybody else. You're kind of a ridiculous person, and in the end, you'll die alone and terrified, like every other human being from the beginning of time. And like, you're just like everybody else, and stop that. And that's a really good thing to learn about yourself. Being humiliated is the greatest learning. In fact, I will say it's not the greatest learning experience. It's the only learning experience, at least for men. Now, I can just speak because I'm a man. And men need to be humiliated fairly regularly to keep their souls pure. Otherwise, they become absolutely unbearable. And anyone who's married to one can tell you that that's true. So I'm really glad that and I think my wife was really grateful that I got fired also. But I would say the second thing I learned, and that's why I'm here today, is that the United States is very geographically isolated, as I noted a minute ago. One of the most isolated countries in the world, and that's been the secret to our success, I would say. We're not getting invaded by Canada, and we would win, for the record, if we were. But American news consumers are not interested in the rest of the world, or that was the idea in all the years I've been in the news business. I'm very interested in the rest of the world because it's interesting, and because I grew up in a family that was interested in the rest of it because of my dad's job. So we did a bunch of stories on places like Hungary and El Salvador and Finland and Brazil, and we went around the world and did these stories, and people turned out to be interested in them. It was a little bit surprising. It would not be surprising here because you're in the middle of Central Europe with 7 neighbors, so everybody in Hungary is thinking about other countries all the time. But in the US, that was a big thing. Like, really, they're interested in Hungary? Very interested in Hungary. So that was such a happy surprise to me, and I plan to there's so much I want to see in the world because the world is resetting completely. The post-war order is collapsing. NATO is going to collapse, obviously. You can't have the driver of NATO, which is the United States, sabotage Germany's main source of cheap energy in Nord Stream. The Biden administration blew up Nord Stream. And the Germans are so self-hating, they won't say anything about it. They sort of put their head down like, no, I don't want to talk about that. Okay. But I do want to talk about it because it's important. First of all, it was the biggest act of industrial sabotage in history. Second, it was the largest man-made CO2 emission in history, which if you're a global warming cultist is like the devil himself come to earth. And the Biden administration did that. But third and most important, it was an attack on Germany, which is the most powerful country in Europe. Western Europe is America's last main ally, and we just attacked our most important ally. NATO cannot stand long term. At some point, the Germans are going to wake up and be like, wait a second, we had chemical plants 2 years ago, now we don't. You just wrecked our economy. I don't think it can continue after that. I really don't. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't see how it does. I mean, I don't have a lot of self-awareness. I wear the same clothes every day. I have the same haircut I had in high school, so I'm not very aware of myself. I'm faintly aware that I'm faintly ridiculous, but that's all I know. So I'm not aware of that. But I will say 2 things. One, we did that show at a moment when there was a power vacuum in the parties. And certainly a lack of ideas in the parties. Like the Republican Party just ran out of gas. Democratic Party ran out of gas. They had no new ideas. They were like, and that's what the trans thing is on some level. You know, they just like took the civil rights movement of the 50s and early 60s, removed African American, put in trans, and it's the same thing. It's like there's no new idea at all. It's just the same template. And the Republican Party stopped with Reagan, peace through strength. Reagan was a great president, famously, but like the world is very different from what it was 40 years ago, but they can't update the files in their head. So our contribution was just to try and think a little bit differently about it. I would say in your specific case, one of the reasons that so many people recognized you is because Hungary really is an inspiration to a lot of Americans. Not because it's radical, but because it's not. It's interesting. So there are revolutions all over the world all the time. My country, thank heaven, has been immune from that for 250 years, but there are always revolutions, and they always promise utopia, and they always fail to deliver. Hungary is so inspiring because it's doing the opposite. It's not a revolution, but it's also not a counter-revolution. This is my read on it. This is a country that knows who it is, understands its own culture, and has decided to preserve it. Not through any radical means, not through gunfire. I mean, just as an outsider, one of the things that instantly strikes me is that Hungary is at the center of the conversation in think tanks all around Washington. How do we stop Hungary? How can we get US taxpayers to send more money to Hungary to stop Orban? Because that's democracy. When a superpower subverts a democratic election in another country, that's democracy. Anyway, but they're very obsessed with Hungary because it's such a huge threat. But I come here and I notice, first thing, how moderate your politics are. Like no one seems on the verge of killing anybody else. Even the people who hate Orban don't seem like they want to kill him. They just don't like him, or they want somebody else, but they don't. It doesn't seem superheated and crazy. It doesn't seem revolutionary. It seems just the opposite of revolutionary, actually. And there's something wonderful about that. There's something wonderfully moderate about that. What Hungary is saying to the West, we want to be part of the West. Hungary is part of NATO. It's not doing anything crazy or revolutionary. It's just like, hey, maybe don't push your garbage on us so aggressively. We've got our own thing going on here. We're pretty happy with it. Maybe you just leave us alone a little bit. I just find that thrilling to watch. Thrilling because it's rational. It's incremental. I hate revolutions because they never improve anyone's life. And Hungary, again, is a model for how you can preserve your dignity. You can have a pro-human society without killing anybody, without screaming, and without blowing up what you already have. It's awesome.